After Tough Stuff canceled my column in 1993, I resolved that we were never going to, certainly I was never going to, put all of my eggs in one basket anymore. So I sought out other publications to have my work appear in. And one of these was called SportsMat Magazine. It's a paper-covered periodical with a lot of stuff about sports cards of various kinds. They took my USFL article, which I'd already published, but then expanded and revised somewhat, and republished it. And they gave me a free plug for my football card book, as well as paying me for the article. So this is one of the oddball publications that we've been published in. There's another one, a newsletter type publication. This is called Sports Card Gazette and Sports Cards Gazette, and they publish some of my stuff in a kind of a very basic fashion. This is some basketball card articles that I also did, and so this is, one of the places where we had gotten our material out to the public, and what was great about them is they, tried to help me get my book out there. And here's another basketball card article, but there's also football card articles in here as well. So this idea of keeping the publications as widespread as possible has been one of our things throughout. Here's our late 1940s football card article in this December 1998 issue of Sports Cards Gazette. One of my favorite pieces that they published in Sports Cards Gazette came out in August of 1998, and it's the top 50 football cards, a set that we've reprised a couple of times and made some adjustments to as time has gone on. So the fabulous 50 vintage football cards are here. At last, that brings us to the magazine articles that I have published and by myself and with Carl over the years. Here, for example, is a copy of the University of Oregon Alumni Magazine, which covered an article I did about football cards, professional football cards of former University of Oregon stars. You can see here that Ahmad Rashad's rookie card, there's Dan Fouts, Norman Van Brocklin, people like Russ Francis and Chris Miller. Here's a rare 1930s card of running back Mike McCulloch. There's been some really wonderful football players from the university over the years. And then in 1994, I did a piece about a card that everybody thought this card was this TV star, Ed O'Neill, but it turned out not to be him. I exposed that hoax and got people to realize that this card that they thought was one thing turned out not to be the television actor. Then we found another outlet for our work, and this one Carl and I did together in 2002. This is Beckett Vintage here. Beckett Sports Collectibles Vintage, a magazine that had a brief run, but not too bad a one. Here's our previously published Feltback article in a new and kind of glitzy format. And then we did another one on Red Grange and his collectibles for Beckett Vintage. This came out in October of 2002. And then in December of 2002, we followed up with a piece about the Jones Rich Dairy Company's Buffalo Bills set. Carl being from Buffalo had a particular interest in that. And we did some small pieces. Here's a Houston Oilers match covers bit that we did for the January 2003 issue of Beckett Sports Collectibles Vintage. And then we found yet another outlet called Gridiron Grades. A young man by the name of Frank Rose had begun a magazine that included football cards, among other, well, it's called the Journal of North American Football Memorabilia. We did our scraps article for him, a revised and updated version of it. A beautiful magazine, very professionally done. We've been publishing in Gridiron Grades ever since, and expect to have a new article out in Gridiron Grades this very month, January of 2014. Here's a 2003 article, again in Beckett Vintage, on the, it's a multi-sport sets with sets that contain football cards, among other things. Here's that Briggs Candy set again, and here's a very early college football card set, and here's the album page from the very first football card. There's Mr. Beecher down there, and another Red Grange, some boxing things. These are multi-sport sets, they're called. Here's our match covers article, again in Beckett Vintage. Cover with George Bush throwing out a baseball. So a lot of these things that we've done, we kind of revise and update and republish, which is something that you kind of have to do here because, like Harry Truman said, the only thing new in the world is the history you don't know about. And we keep finding things out about these cards and the memorabilia that we feel needs to be brought to the attention of collectors. Here's our 1926 Spalding set article with a very famous card of Red Grange featured in it. And here's that Washington Redskins match cover set. We wrote about it as well for Beckett Vintage back in 2003. And here's the Mayfair Candy set that we talked about earlier that was previously published in SCD, but also updated for Gridiron Grades in the summer of 2003. Mysterious Threes, this is a piece about the 1948 Bowman set, which has a kind of an unusual factor in that the cards that are divisible by 3 appear to be rarer than others. Here's a copy of the album that the cards were set to go into. We did that in July of 2003. Here's our Bread Labels article, again, in the autumn 2003 issue of Gridiron Grades. Here we have cereal box collectibles piece again. Here's Wheaties. The Breakfast of Champions is got a long history of featuring football stars and collectibles on their boxes. Here's a very unusual set of cards. Lake to Lake, a company in Wisconsin, issued some football cards with greats like Bart Starr and Paul Hornung. We did a piece about that. We also did a piece about the Topps Magic Photo set, came out in 1948, had a photo album and contained a number of different football cards. These are cards that you would get blank and expose them to light and the picture would magically appear. It was a photo development thing, kind of a neat little gimmick.